All right, folks. You guys there? Matt and David?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So, what we're going to do now is the gem, and then we're going to play this brand new interview that we just recorded just the other day with Slavoj Žižek. And then we'll come back. That's a little over 30 minutes, and then we'll go to the post game. All right. But now it's gem time.
Yeah,
That's another guy I feel like could be grading the gems right there.
I like Paul. That was really great, actually.
Paul is brilliant. It's only hitters now from TMBS. I will say people will learn this in the post game, but next Tuesday, insanely excited about the guest we're getting on. Insanely excited.
So sorry.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So
You're good to go?
Yeah, I'm good. So there's obviously a lot going on right now. We are living in a completely new world, and we don't know what's going to come on the other side of this kind of, COVID capitalism and the economic collapse. But I want to talk about a couple of things that are very important that have been going on that have been sort of pushed to the back. The first has been what's been going on with oil. Basically, in the middle of this pandemic, just right as it was starting to really hit Europe and the United States, Saudi Arabia basically started a price war with the rest of the oil-producing nations. And it completely plummeted the price of oil for everyone. And specifically Saudi Arabia and Russia were in this huge conflict about how much oil they were going to be producing. So I bring this up because Donald Trump has surprisingly stepped in and has negotiated this massive new agreement with the majority of the oil-producing nations. And it's been very interesting to see what happens. First of all, just recently, the deal was announced on Sunday, and just today, oil actually dropped below $20 a barrel, which is historically low. And low oil prices mean that it's not very profitable to drill, and it means that the many people who are employed in the oil industry, they face layoffs and things like that. So it's very significant, even though we want to push for a post-carbon future. This is a significant part of the global economy. So basically what happened in this agreement was the majority of countries at OPEC, what they're calling OPEC Plus, have now agreed to drastically cut the amount of oil that they're producing. They're going to be cutting around 9.7 million barrels a day of oil production, which is massive. It's the largest oil output cut ever in history. And it's been very interesting to see how that has happened on the geopolitical level, and also specifically what it means for the U.S.-Saudi relations.
David, just real quick, because so just to be really clear, you might think superficially, because like from a U.S. consumer perspective, I guess it doesn't really make a difference now because people are there's less energy consumption, but lower oil prices means you can fill your tank up for less. That's a good thing. Trump is concerned, though, because if the glut that was produced by overproduction and the Saudi play not only could lead to layoffs, but it can undermine the U.S. shale market and U.S. domestic production. So that's what he's really concerned about.
That's
right?
100%. And it seems very clear that those are the people who are calling the shots behind the scenes. So the geopolitical note that I wanted to mention was that the United States, basically, the United States senators from this was reported in the Financial Times, senators from the major oil producing states in the U.S. were on the phone with the Saudis. And they threatened that if the Saudi Arabians do not come to the table and dramatically shift their practices, that the United States is going to reevaluate their entire relationship with Saudi Arabia. So this has basically been a massive geopolitical story that has been, very much on the back burner, obviously because of what we're facing. But it's just another thing that's happening at the worst possible time for the global economy. So that's happening. And then JP Morgan and Wells Fargo just released their recent quarter reports. JP Morgan reported that they had lost 69% of their net income, Wells Fargo 89%. The IMF came out today, and they said their outlook for the next few months is the worst outlook since the 1930s. The IMF estimates that economies across the globe, they're going to see their economies shrink by 5%. And for countries in the advanced capitalist countries, around 6.1%. So we're seeing a squeeze on oil, and we're seeing a squeeze on finance capital happening at a time when, because of policies, for example, by the Obama administration and by the flawed recovery that we have an entire economy based on corporations that are very much like the WeWork model, right? Where there's a bunch of nonsense saying that they're a tech company, but fundamentally they're a real estate company with very shaky path to profitability. WeWork just announced that to their workers that there's likely going to be many layoffs in the near future. So we're going to see a squeeze on finance, and we're also seeing a squeeze on business, and a lot of business that has been on very shaky ground for a very long time. They're holding massive amounts of debts. They're holding investments that don't seem like they're going to pan out, and their business models are fundamentally unprofitable. Now, what does this mean for us? It means that the federal government and the international community understand that a lot of coordination is going to be needed to be done in the near future. But this coordination is not necessarily going to be something that's going to be beneficial for working class Americans or working class people. And there has been no fundamental shift in the conception of what has led to this crisis, right? Obviously, coronavirus and the COVID crisis created the crisis where people had to start looking at their balance sheets. So these massive corporations that are holding a lot of unprofitable investments were participating in kind of wasteful activities, and we're just holding lots of debt. Now we're having to look at their balance sheet. But that kind of toxic behavior has been developed over the past few decades. The just-in-time production models have been developed over a period of time when stability and even long-term profitability were not on anyone's mind. It was always about making as much short-term profit as you can in an environment that was encouraged by the United States by keeping the price of money very cheap. So look, we're going to see a bunch of nonsense from the federal government, but something that is not going to happen unless we start demanding it is going to be a fundamental shift in our economic relationships. And that's what fundamentally matters. These people, you should read some of the op-eds that are going in the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg recently. People think that this is going to be a short little blip and this is a huge opportunity, right? They do not recognize that across the board, this kind of capitalism on steroids that has sprinted into the most speculative aspects of the economy, basically finance, that all this movement in our economic system towards that part of the economic pie, the economic community, means that these crises are going to hit much harder, and they're going to continue to grow exponentially unless we fundamentally change the dynamics of our relationship to finance capital and our addiction to cheap money. So I just wanted to put out a couple things real quick on a hopeful level that, like, what could we do if we were in a situation where we had a kind of progressive government, progressive coalition? Fundamentally, what are we going to need to do after this crisis? We're going to need to get people to work. So many people who've been working in precarious jobs because this economy created precarious jobs, because that was the only place to put the majority of people so that you could still have consumers while still maintaining the power dynamic of a few people owning everything in society. People are going to need to work. We need a federal jobs guarantee for sure. We need to be mobilizing people on a massive scale, because once this is over, once this crisis is over and we're all able to get out of quarantine, there's going to be a lot of people who don't have jobs, and they do not have any access to the capital markets, which is the only thing that they're going to be propping up. Two, if we had a progressive government, we could be taking over the oil and gas corporations. Now, I know we're not in a situation like that, but it's important for us to start thinking about what would we do if we were in power. And three, there's going to need to be a lot of bailouts, and there are going to be a lot of bankruptcies in the near future. The federal government should come in, and they say they will buy these companies out, and they will give the companies, they will create an entity that allows those companies to then be owned by their own workers. Right now, I don't think that Donald Trump is going to do that. He might put in a federal jobs program, and it's going to be our responsibility to make sure that that's a progressive program, because what are they going to try to do? They're going to try to turn that into workfare. They're going to try to say, if you don't work in the federal jobs program, that you don't have access to fundamental benefits. So we need to do two things at once, right? We need to recognize the reality of the current situation, and we also need to be able to understand what we would be doing if we were in power, because there's going to be a lot of bold and massive changes in the near future, because the system is on the brink of collapse, and we need to make sure that we're at least thinking in the correct way to prepare to come up with solutions and then the ways to implement those.
Absolutely, that's really important. We're going to do more coverage on those oil and OPEC stories, and in general, it's just so important. And thank you, David. This is another part of the incredible quality of this show. You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.